Yeah, I hear ya. What, another Mark video? Come on. Well, I felt that the Mark IV video was alright, but for those of you attached to your 22 pistols that don't want to trade up, I made this for you. This video is pretty much all about maintenance. Hopefully a pretty complete one at that. I covered history and everything in the Mark IV video, so go watch that if that tickles your fancy. But this is all nitty gritty. So we're going to start by covering maintenance without stripping the gun down, and maybe some signs to look for when to do so. So let's go over light primer strikes. This could be one of three things. First, and most commonly, it'll be ammo, so try a different box of 22s. If the problem persists, look at the bolt face and the breech face. If there appears to be an angled corner on the outer edges of the breech, well, I have good news for you. The gun isn't broke, it's just really dirty. You see, 22s are a very dirty round, and they'll send carbon all over the place in a semi-auto. That'll build up on the edges of the breech and bolt face, and, because there's no real lockup, that carbon will build up to the point that the bolt face is not properly seated on the breech. This means that the rim of the 22 isn't getting the full impact from the firing pin. This will cause light primer strikes. Now, if cleaning the bolt face doesn't work, then I have bad news for you. It's likely that the firing pin itself needs to be replaced. Now, to take this apart, you'll need a couple tools. First, you'll need a flathead screwdriver or a pick. This will be used to pry the mainspring latch downward, and you may need a soft mallet depending on how tightly your barreled action is connected to the frame. So, let's get into disassembling then. First, we drop the hammer, and I know this is a rimfire, but this here is a mainspring assembly, meaning as long as that hammer is down, not only is that hammer strut inside this housing, but the spring inside is itself compressed. So drop the hammer and let's get to work. So now we'll need to pry that tab and the housing should rotate easily. With the mainspring housing tilted upward, pull down using the bottom of the frame to help gain leverage. Now what we're doing here is pulling the mainspring assembly out of the bolt and the recoil spring. So if the curve on this wears, it'll take more force as the contact angle becomes steeper. One thing to be wary of is that there is a pin that has a potential to walk. If you force this with a mallet, you can cause damage to the Luger frame. These have a lip that the pin can catch on. With the mainspring housing removed, the bolt can come rearward, but be careful that the hammer strut doesn't catch on the frame, as the hammer must rotate rearward in order for the bolt to come out. Forcing the bolt can also cause damage, as it can swedge over corners in the frame, as well as damage the hammer strut. From here, you will need to push the barrel to action forward. Most of the time you can do this with just your fingers, but occasionally, some need just a few gentle raps with a soft mallet. Now, before anyone gets frustrated and grabs a hammer, keep in mind that using a metal hammer will likely damage the action. Now, with the barreled action removed, you can access everything to clean. We won't have time to get to the frame, but most things in there can be accessed using a Q-tip. For reassembly, put the barreled action back on the frame and push it rearward, once again using a soft mallet if needed. Then, in goes the bolt, once again making sure that the hammer is rotated all the way back. Now, we can get the mainspring housing started, but in order for it to lock into place, the hammer must now be rotated forward so that the hammer strut can go back into the mainspring housing. But the strut can't just rest on the frame, we must position it rearward, so when the housing rotates forward, the strut seats properly. After this is done, we can lock the mainspring housing back into position. Hopefully this was helpful, and there are a lot of aftermarket parts that can make this task much less daunting. This has been Steven on the disassembly and reassembly of the Ruger Mark series pre-4, and look out for our podcast next week.